I have just a philosophical problem with a lot of guys on my side right now and how they do politics and how we run campaigns these days, and that people try to whip you into a frenzy to be outraged about everything. And at some point, it just becomes not sustainable and it burns people out. The constant outrage, the constant anger, it does eventually burn people out. So, for example, there is no reason to be outraged about the use of force provision in the FBI's search of Mar-a-Lago because it was a pro forma thing that they put in every search, including Joe Biden's house. Anywhere the FBI searches under a warrant, they do that. Now, and I say that about Joe Biden's house, I'm not sure if it was a warrant, but it is standard for warrants for them to be able to do it. It's that I would say they should have made an exception and not put it in Trump's. But at the same time, remember, it is a factual statement that they coordinated with the Secret Service to make sure Donald Trump wasn't even going to be there. Donald Trump, they knew, was in New York before they began the raid. So the hyperbole and hysteria out there from the right, it's just discrediting. So when the time comes to actually be outraged, then you burn out on it. And it's frustrating because there are times you need to raise people's awareness. But when you've been Chicken Little the whole time, or the boy who cries wolf, people get distracted and they're like, they're upset about something else. This is the thing you should be outraged about. The President of the United States, Joe Biden, has decided to release gas reserves, to sell gas reserves, to lower the price of gas, to help his reelection. That you should be outraged with. And the reason you should be outraged about that is because he's done it with the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, which is separate from the gas reserves, and he has whittled away our oil and gas reserves that are called strategic for a reason. If something happens, whether it's a oil boycott by Arab nations or a war, we need those petroleum reserves. Donald Trump released some, and when the price of a barrel of oil was $30 a barrel, the Senate Democrats blocked Donald Trump from refilling the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. Now the price of a barrel of oil is far higher, and the cost of refilling it is going up, and it's all been politics. And it was politics by Trump to release it, but it was politics by the Democrats to block him from filling it back up. And it was politics from Joe Biden to release more. And it's politics from Joe Biden to release the gas, because Joe Biden is concerned about inflation, not because he's concerned about inflation, but because he's concerned about his election. Every time you go to the grocery store and buy groceries, part of the price of whatever you buy is the gas price. Now let's think about that. How do they determine the price? Let's take a can of green beans. Part of the can is the cost of growing the green beans and harvesting the green beans and the machines used to harvest the green beans that run on gas. Part of it is the cost of the can itself and the label. Part of the cost is the transportation to the grocery store. So the transportation from the farm that is used by gas, the transportation from the farm to the canner, from the canner to the labeler, from the labeler to the grocery store. All of that is gas. So as gas prices go down, inflation begins to go down. It's something that the Biden administration has refused to grapple with because it impedes their climate agenda. The climate agenda that the Biden administration is pursuing necessitates expensive gas. The problem is Americans don't like paying higher prices at the grocery store, and Americans don't like paying higher prices at the pump. And so Joe Biden must balance out the Green New Deal with the reality of people are furious with high prices. You bring down energy costs, you begin to fight inflation more than what the Fed is doing. You expand oil and gas production in this country. Remember, it's a futures market. You start opening up more portions of Alaska instead of restricting portions of Alaska. You bring down the price of a barrel of oil today in anticipation of a glut of oil coming to the market tomorrow. It's a futures market, not a present market. The problem here is that Joe Biden, the Democrats, and much of the American media have internalized the idea that Donald Trump is the threat. Donald Trump is the existential threat. Donald Trump is the thing we must be concerned about. So they're not as concerned about China. They're not as concerned about Russia. They're not as concerned about terrorists. They're not as concerned about terrorists possibly coming across the border. They're just not concerned about those things because they think Donald Trump is a bigger threat. They think an American potential president is a bigger threat to America than those countries that actually wish to destroy us. Donald Trump is many things, but he is not the existential threat that Democrats have internalized. Joe Biden is risking our national security to placate the Democratic left with an open border. What's his name? The Secretary of Homeland Security was on with Neil Cavuto. They had this exchange.
Neil, we took action a long time ago, and migration
this
is
was
a
just
very
announced in the
dynamic
last week.
phenomenon, and we are seeing the results that take time to take hold.
They took action a long time ago, and they're only now seeing the results of it, except we've still got a stream of people coming across. We've still got cities overwhelmed, and not just red states, not just Texas. You know, it was genius of Greg Abbott and Ron DeSantis to ship illegal aliens around the country. Greg Abbott's still doing it, trying to relieve some of the constraints and strains on Texas, shipping illegal aliens to other parts of the country. The federal government is doing it as well, and they don't want to mention it. They want to blame Greg Abbott and not acknowledge they've been doing the same. Y'all, this is the thing you should be outraged by. The President of the United States is jeopardizing our national security. He's ruined relations with Saudi Arabia and oil producers in the Middle East. He wants to prop up Iran and Venezuela, two oil producers that are not our friends. And it's all because of his election. And now this is part of the problem. If Joe Biden were to get reelected, he doesn't have to worry about you after that. So he's playing the short-term game of trying to reduce energy prices for you. And after he gets elected, screw you, all in on the Green New Deal. Your prices are going to skyrocket. He's going to wreck the economy. He's going to push you into your battery-powered vehicle. Joe Biden will no longer be accountable to you, the voter. He no longer has to humor you. He's no longer got to placate you. And we can see right now for his election, he's desperate to get your vote, and he's willing to sacrifice your national security. What happens if war comes? I'm increasingly concerned about the direction of the world. You can see Iran, Russia, China, North Korea, Venezuela, they're aligning against us. South Africa is giving harbor space to the Chinese military. Countries in the Caribbean are openly flirting with having a Chinese naval presence in our backyard. The Chinese are moving people into Mexico, which itself is a failed state with the cartels in alliance with the Chinese. That doesn't get talked about enough. This Eastern axis is not just aligning against us, it's lining up around us. And it's trying to strangle us financially. You know, during the 1980s, Ronald Reagan realized that we could outspend the Soviet Union and drive them to collapse. The Chinese seem to have made a similar calculation about us. Now, it's not going well for the Chinese. If we're honest about it, the Chinese are actually doing worse than us. The financial situation in China is just desperate at this point. Banks are collapsing. They have this entire underground lending operation in China that local governments partake in, and it's collapsing. The financial crisis is starting to spiral in China. Xi Jinping is going to need an exit hatch, and that may mean war. And if the war comes, we don't have a strategic petroleum reserve because Joe Biden spent it all, gave it all away in order to win your votes. We don't have a strategic gasoline reserve because Joe Biden dumped it all into the open market to lower prices to win re-election. The Democrats convinced themselves they must stop Donald Trump at any cost. And in the process, they've made the United States more vulnerable than ever before. The FBI feels fairly certain that terrorists have crossed our southern border and have gotten away from federal authorities and that they are in this country. Today, German authorities found explosives and detonators buried near pipelines that NATO relies on for fuel production. And people are already blaming the Russians. Sabotaging an oil pipeline NATO uses. The world is increasingly unstable, and Joe Biden, the president of the United States, is more concerned about Donald Trump than the stability of the world and the Western alliance. Joe Biden views stopping Donald Trump as more important than stopping our enemies. Joe Biden views stopping Donald Trump as a greater priority than helping our allies. Joe Biden is bringing instability to the world and risking our national security, all to try to bribe voters to stop Donald Trump. He's doing it with student loans. The Biden administration, Bloomberg is reporting today, is looking at more student loan debt forgiveness, despite what the Supreme Court told them to do and not do. They're trying to find another way to backdoor it in, raising more fiscal calamity in the United States, causing our debt to explode, putting our fiscal circumstances at jeopardy. Part of me wonders if this is all part of the design. So many people on the left hate the United States. They're perfectly happy to put us behind China because they think that's what we deserve. And, sadly, there are some on the right who think the same thing these days. They flirt with Viktor Orban. They flirt with Chinese and the Russians. There's a whole lot of America hatred on the far left and the far right, the horseshoe theory playing itself out. But the fact of the matter is that this president has decided to bribe the American public through student loans, through lower oil prices, lower gas prices, through artificial means that jeopardize our national and fiscal security just to win re-election, because Joe Biden has convinced himself Donald Trump is a bigger threat to us than those countries that are actual threats to us. And he shouldn't be rewarded for it, and Americans should not take the bait.